That was perfectly
I don't know if we missed him or not, but we're live, and that's the definition that we're live. Golden Black Live Friday afternoon edition. I don't know if we'd say, Kyle, that we're in scramble mode. We're in weather mode. We got the Weather Center in the corner, Jeff Smith and Cameron trying to determine what's next for this great weather we're having in Lafayette, Indiana today, West Lafayette and Lafayette. And it's a little hail at noon. On down the line. This is Kyle Charters to your right. I'm Alan Karpick, and we'll be joined shortly by Clark Kellogg, who will be joining us from CBS, obviously the lead analyst on does the national championship game, and we'll look forward to getting his comments and thoughts on where the Purdue men's basketball team might be headed near term and long term. So it'll be fun to hear from Clark. Also, Tim Tibesar, Purdue's defensive coordinator, will join us at 2:20, and Cathy Wright-Eger, the leadership John R. Wooden Leadership Institute advisor. And I had some interesting things to say about the program at Purdue, and it's really an excellent program that they put together with respect to leadership with student athletes at Purdue. Kyle, a lot going on as we can tell, and yet you're headed off tonight to Indianapolis, and the Boilermaker women take on Michigan State in Game 2.
Yeah, hopefully the games in the tournament will get a little bit better. Yesterday's average margin of victory for the favored teams was 27. So just showing maybe the bottom half of the bracket, they're not quite as good as the top half. But Purdue with an opportunity here. You know, they play Michigan State, who they lost to in overtime a couple of weeks ago, and then perhaps Penn State tomorrow night, who they lost to in a couple of games down the stretch when they lost those 5-6. So maybe an opportunity for some redemption for the Boilermakers starting tonight.
All right. Well, how this show works, if you're new to it, and we've had a really good run of folks watching and chatting back and forth certainly over the last few weeks, especially as we've gotten deep into or getting closer to March Madness, I should say. But Hilton Garden Inn, one of our sponsors, and you can click on our sponsor logos and obviously chat amongst yourselves. We'll pick questions out of there, or you can send us direct questions also on there. And in addition, if you missed part of the show, we'll have an archive version not only on goldenblack.com but also on WLFI. Our sponsors, as I mentioned, Hilton Garden Inn in West Lafayette. When tomorrow's a big day, stay at HGI tonight. State Farm agent Trent Johnson. Call him at 765-743-9595 or visit him on the web at trentismyagent.com. Follett's Purdue stores, your college game day store, Purdue since 1945. And a fixture in Mackey Arena, obviously, if you're looking for Purdue merchandise. And as you head to the spring game in April, I know that Jeff Julich will be out there selling merchandise at the store north of Ross-Ade Stadium. Of course, also West Point Steakhouse, hand-cut steaks, and a family-owned business in West Point, Indiana, just a short drive from Mackey Arena and Ross-Ade Stadium. So, Kyle, you look at this situation, and always when we get down to this point, now the men's team certainly seems to be, is in firmly into the NCAA tournament. And it's still a moving target, obviously, with the men having the opportunity to go to Indiana on Sunday night, 6 o'clock tip, and see what happens. It's going to be an interesting, and yet you expect Indiana to be pretty fired up heading into that game.
Well, I think especially so after coming off the game against Michigan State. But I think I would expect it to be a much closer game, much more hard-fought game by Purdue on Sunday, even though they'll be playing in a pretty hostile atmosphere down there at Indiana. I think I give the Hoosiers an edge because it is at home. They have a tendency to get some calls down there at times, it seems like. But I think Purdue's playing very well. I think a couple of things have happened. They've found some good rotations. They've narrowed the bench. They're playing better defense, I think, as Brian sort of points out in the story. They talked to Matt Payne at the teleconference earlier, not quite pressuring as much up top, which has helped them, prevented them from getting beat as often. And you don't have a guy like Jawan Johnson inside to sort of clean up the mistakes or funnel players too as a shot blocker. And I think some of those changes have really helped Purdue here in the last half dozen games.
Yeah, there's any question about that. There's been a lot of discussion on what seed Purdue will get in the Big Ten tournament. And having done some looking at it, it's still a somewhat, it made a little bit less muddied by the fact that Michigan wins at Illinois last night, and that kind of clears it up to some extent. It clears it up for whether if Indiana beats Purdue, get into the not having to play on Thursday and obviously get the bye to Friday. But right now, it really looks like if Michigan State beats Ohio State, the Spartans obviously will win the Big Ten championship. And then where it gets interesting is that Purdue or Michigan would jump to the number 2 seed in that scenario. Ohio State would fall back to number 3. And how that affects Purdue is the Boilermakers are pretty much locked in, if Purdue does not beat Indiana, that is, to a 6 seed in the Big Ten tournament, which means that it would play Ohio State in the second game on Friday. I mean, if the Boilermakers advance that far. So
you'd like to play Wisconsin or Michigan.
Well, and I think Michigan, in all honesty, because I think Wisconsin's pretty much pegged into the 4 seed unless they lose. As long as Wisconsin beats Illinois at home, they'll be the 4 seed, and Indiana or Purdue will be fighting for that 5 seed. All right, we have Clark Kellogg on the line. And Clark, I know you're doing nothing these days, so we really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us. And first and foremost, are you headed anywhere this weekend, or do you have the weekend off before you head into it?
No, are you kidding? This time of year, I don't get any weekends
That's what
off.
I thought.
And I'm glad not to have any weekends off. It's a wonderful blessing to be gainfully employed and to enjoy your work. I will be in East Lansing. I'm actually going to leave tomorrow for the Ohio State-Michigan State game in East Lansing on Sunday. Then I'll head to New York for our pre-tournament seminar on Monday and Tuesday, and I'll be back in Indianapolis on Thursday getting ready for the semifinals and finals of the Big Ten tournament at Bankers Life Fieldhouse.
Yeah, and you have the chance to, is this the time of year, if you go back to your college days, is this cramming time for you? Are you trying to put as much information into your head as you possibly can?
Not
or do you
really.
Just let it flow?
You know what I try to do? I try to cram all year long.
Yeah.
I'm always watching games, and I'm not just watching the teams that I'll be covering on any particular weekend. I try to watch the Long Beach States and the Murray States and some of the other teams that look like they might be tournament teams, Iona and Long Island University. I mean, it's wonderful to have technology the way we do, where I can DVR games, I can download games on my computer. Obviously, there's tons and tons of basketball on if you have any of the packages. So I watch a ton of games, and I'm taking notes all the time so I can at least be abreast. My goal is to have seen, either in person or by tape, by Selection Sunday, every team that will show up in our second and third round region. That's my goal. And I get close because I do diligently try to follow. There might be a surprise or two in terms of automatic qualifiers. But for the most part, I watch every conference championship game either live or by tape. So I've seen pretty much everybody at least once by the time we get to that Selection Sunday bracket.
Clark, Kyle here. Just what do you think about Purdue, and what have they done differently here, in the last half dozen games or so to pick things up and probably put themselves pretty well into the tournament?
Well, I think one thing is they've played at Hummel has really seemed to get his legs under him. Anytime you're coming off the knee injuries that he's had, even when you get back to the court, there's still a period of adjustment from a basketball standpoint. For the most part, his off seasons have been dedicated to trying to get his knee healthy enough to play. So he hasn't been able to couple that with working on his game. You have to balance that out. So as he's able to practice and play a little bit more, you can start to see a level of explosiveness come back, a level of sharpness. I saw it against Michigan State in the game there where they played extremely well in the first half and ran out of gas a bit in the second half. But I think that's it. I haven't seen any games since then other than scores. But I know Robbie's played well, and DJ Bird was playing at a really high level prior to the one-game suspension, and it seems like he's been shooting the ball. The little fellow in the backcourt, Lewis Jackson, has been playing like a senior that's hungry and has something to prove. So all of that bodes well for the Boilermakers as we head towards Selection Sunday.
Rob Hummel, one of the great stories in college basketball, and you can appreciate just the human interest side of what he's been through. Why do you think that people gravitate to him? He's such a pull, not only in West Lafayette, a very emotional senior night in Mackey Arena Wednesday, but this is a guy that's liked even in Bloomington, as they say, and respected around the country. Why do you think that is?
Well, there are a number of things. I think it starts with his character and who he is and what he is as a person. I mean, that's where it begins in my mind. He's always been a humble, hard-working type of guy, and others man-centered type guy. He's never been too hung up on what he's accomplished. He's very comfortable with what he's been able to do as a basketball player, but I think the way he plays and the way he's persevered through really difficult circumstances with his knees, I know it's not been easy. I've been there years ago myself, not the same type of knee injury, but just the wear and tear it is on you mentally when you're trying to work through an injury like that. So I think all of those things lead to him being highly respected and highly esteemed by anybody that follows college basketball and knows a little bit about what he's done and what he's had to go through.
And one of the things in his last several weeks is obviously he's raised his level of play a great deal, and you talked about just maybe the natural timing that it happens for him or for a player that has that kind of injury. Mm-hmm. Everybody expects him to be perfect in November. It takes to February or March sometimes to get through. But talk about that, but also what you see for him potentially at the next level and what will be some of the challenges that Rob will have to face hoping to play professionally in the NBA.
Well, I know his focus clearly is on the here and now, which is where it should be, and he's continuing to get better. But he's still only going to max out at 85 to 90% of what he's going to become, barring if, in fact, he doesn't have any setbacks. He needs another full summer of continuing to strengthen, another full off season, I should say, of strengthening his leg and also working on his game in tandem. He's not been able to do that yet. So I still think he has a chance. And, again, without any setbacks, he'll have a chance to find his way on an NBA roster. I don't know how that can unfold in terms of whether he's drafted or whether he has to bounce around in Europe, but I think he's going to have a chance. And again, it's contingent upon him continuing to progress well with his knee. And I'm not a doctor, so he'll be evaluated by the pro folks when it's time for him to be considered for that next step. They'll look at him thoroughly and have an idea of what the likelihood of him not having additional issues with that knee is and how far he can go with it. And at that point, it's just a matter of, staying injury-free and getting back as close as he can to the level he showed, prior to the knee injuries. And a number of guys that have been able to return and play at a really high level, a pro level, having gone through knee trouble. So he's certainly capable of doing that, I think.
Where's the Big Ten stack up this year? I think a lot of the experts say it's a pretty big league and maybe the best in the country. What do you think?
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it depends on how you evaluate the Big Ten. If you're talking about competitiveness and high-quality teams top and bottom, I think that certainly bodes well and stands out. I mean, you've got Michigan State and Ohio State that look like maybe a notch above, but Wisconsin is right in that mix as well. I think Indiana is coming on in really a good fashion here of late. And you've got Purdue starting to play some pretty good basketball. So I think the conference is right there, whether it's one or two. The Big 12 has been impressive, top to bottom as well. The Big East may be a notch below what it's been in some years, but still quality teams. I don't have any problem with the Big Ten being ranked one or two in the country.
And you're going to have an interesting Big Ten tournament next week. I mean, really, yes, I think Michigan State and Ohio State may be the cream of the crop in this league, but there are 12 teams, or maybe 10, that can make some serious noise in that Big Ten tournament. Is that the way you see it as well?
No question, and I left Michigan out as I was talking about. Yeah. They've actually got a chance to get a share of the regular season conference title if, in fact, things break properly for them. They've got to win their last game, and they need Ohio State to handle business in East Lansing, and they would have a chance to get a piece of the title. So you've got 5, 6 legitimate tournament teams, and I think Purdue, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, and then Iowa has certainly shown that it's capable of beating any of the teams in the league on a given night. Northwestern has played just about everybody tough. Illinois, despite the 6-11 conference record, is still a capable team if it can get contributions from everybody at a high level. That's kind of been the issue with the Fighting Illini. And Minnesota may be as difficult a 5-12 team as there is to play. I mean, when you consider some of the wins they had earlier and how they've competed throughout conference play.
and everybody asks this question about dark horse teams. I know on Twitter I saw you talking about Iowa State a little bit, but tell us about who is that Butler or VCU in this year's tournament, and what do you expect? Could it come from anywhere again as it's done here the last couple of years?
You know what? I said last year when somebody asked me this that Butler could be last year's Butler, and it ended up playing itself out. You've got to keep VCU in the conversation. That's a good team. I've watched them play a couple of times on TV. They're deep, they're athletic, they pressure you, they can shoot the three. Drexel is having a terrific year under Bruiser Flint. Those two teams, to me, are tournament teams regardless of what happens in their conference tournament. I think Memphis is an interesting team to kind of keep an eye on. I had them earlier in the year. Long Beach State out west played a brutal non-conference schedule. Did not win many of those games, but still competed well against some high-level competition and is unblemished in their conference race. So that's a team. Wichita State is certainly capable. Murray State has gotten plenty of love, deservedly so. That's really a good team. So there are a number of teams out there that I think have a chance. And to me, guys, it's always what do the matchups look like? Where are you on the seed line? But more important than that, who is it that you have to face? And how well might you fare against that other team based on what you do well and what their strengths and weaknesses are?
How big is the pool of teams you think that could win it all? I mean, you're looking at about 10?
I think you're looking at 10, maybe 10, I think. Obviously, you start with the heavyweights that are at the top of the heap. I mean, you look at Syracuse, Kentucky, Syracuse. I think you've got to put Kansas and Missouri in there. You've got to look at Duke and North Carolina. That's 6. Michigan State, Ohio State. And then you could possibly get a team off the path, maybe a Vanderbilt that I think is a dangerous tournament team, or anybody else of that ilk, if they get things to unfold, if there's an upset in front of them that takes somebody out of the mix that could be more problematic for them. So that's the fun of the bracket. But I think you're looking at probably 8 to 10 teams that you feel like have what it takes to win it all, and then you see how it breaks after that.
All right, Clark. Well, one last question on your alma mater, Ohio State. One of the teams that on paper looks the part, looks like a national championship contender, has fallen off here a little bit of late. Chemistry issues, or is it just that? Is it just like a lot of other teams? You just have to have the right thing fall at the right place for it to go deep into the tournament.
You know, I've kind of studied a little bit the last 3 losses the Buckeyes have had. They scored 53 points a game in those 3 losses. Did not shoot it well, and some of it was shot selection, some of it was impatience. This is still a really good team. It's a different team. They don't have the consistent perimeter shooting that they've had in the past. I really think for the Buckeyes to be at their best, William Buford has to play at an all-conference level, which he hasn't done consistently this year for whatever reason. You know, sometimes you come back as a pro prospect, as a senior, with high expectations. You can put a little extra pressure on yourself. And the dynamics of the team have changed. I mean, he was pretty much throughout his career kind of a second, third kind of option when you had other people around him that were doing the bulk of the shooting and scoring, so he was able to blend in. Now he's expected to be a prominent player, and that changes how you approach the game yourself and how other teams game plan for you. But for them to be their best, I think he's got to raise the level of play, raise his level of play, and if he does, then they're capable of beating anybody.
All right, Clark. Well, thanks again so much for your time, and it's an incredibly busy time. We'll expect to have you on the next 2 or 3 shows. I know you have a lot of time. No, we appreciate the time. Have a safe trip up to East Lansing. And if you're a Purdue fan, you hope that you'll be calling that game Sunday afternoon if the Boilermakers can find their way to pull a couple upset sets and get to the championship game. And you'll do Saturday as well for the Big Ten?
Oh, yeah, we'll be there Saturday for the semifinals and Sunday for the championship game. So I'll be there. It's just a matter of which teams are going to show up.
Yeah.
But Jim Nance and Steve Kerr and the rest of our CBS crew, we know exactly where we'll be. Parked courtside talking about the 2 teams trying to win the Big Ten Conference Tournament Championship.
And like you said, that's the definition of a good gig. So
that's right, no question about it.
All right, safe travels. Thanks again, Clark. We're going to take a short break on Gold and Black Live and bring in Tim Tibesar and Stacey Clarity, and we'll talk football and spring football and defense and all of those types of things in the next couple of minutes on Gold and Black Live.
One night, One team victorious. The story behind the score. The rivalries. The big plays. From the sidelines to you. On the air, online. Are you ready for the frenzy? Friday Night Frenzy. High school football from where you live.
Check out the Purdue collection now at Follett's. Boiler up with Nike Fantastic T-shirts, League and Champion fashion colors. Simply fabulous, simply Follett's. Purdue pride everywhere on game day. Nike sideline, worn by the team, by the players, and by you. And make every day game day with tailgate toss. Follett's, Purdue pride, a Purdue tradition, 17 game day locations.
West Point Steakhouse is a family-owned restaurant known for premium quality steaks. Open for dinner Thursday through Saturday. Stop by for the Thursday night prime rib special or Friday and Saturday night specials like pasta and seafood. Be sure to come and enjoy all the food and fun at West Point Steakhouse.
You can now get a quote or buy car insurance 24 hours a day. Call me, State Farm Agent Trent Johnson, at 743-9595 and see how much money you can save today.
Going to the Purdue game? Stay at Hilton Garden Inn, West Lafayette at the Wabash Landing. Your family will love the well-appointed guest rooms, the pool, whirlpool, fitness center, the breakfast buffet, and the amazing Hilton Garden Inn staff. Located just 4 blocks from Purdue University, Hilton Garden Inn has long been the choice for Purdue fans. Call today for a reservation and make Hilton Garden Inn your #1 choice.
When you see it happen, report it. Send us your news stories, photos, and videos with our Report It feature. It's easy with WLFI.com and the WLFI smartphone app. With a few simple clicks, you can send videos and photos of breaking news coverage. See your submissions on air as part of our broadcast or online in the Report It gallery. WLFI.com. Always mobile, always connected.
Welcome to segment 2, Gold and Black Live, and we've grown by 1 number, and it's actually by 2 good people, and not that Kyle isn't. We're glad to have Tim Tibesar here, and also Stacy Clarity. And Tim, Purdue's new defensive coordinator, and we were just talking off air that you were getting used to you know the route to the office and back home, and life is busy in your role right now. But welcome to the area, and you're going to be busy starting with spring practice next week.
Absolutely. We're really looking forward to getting down to the football part of coaching, and so that's what next week brings for us, and to get back out on the football field and have some fun again.
Yeah, and of course spring ball starts on Tuesday here in West Lafayette. It certainly is different than where you've been the last 3 years in the Canadian Football League, but exciting nonetheless. You have some new faces, obviously, to get to know. But talk about your evaluation process and how you will begin to assess what you have coming back on the defense, and how you're going to move forward with that.
Well, a lot of that's already started with taking a look at some of the film from last year to try to get an initial evaluation on the kind of players that we have, and then being able to spend the last couple weeks seeing them during their workouts, and then when we have what we call our concourse workouts, where we're actually able to go out there and do some individual position work and stuff like that. And fortunately we're able to tape it all, and so we get to watch it as coaches and evaluate all these guys. But the big test in reality comes when we get them out there in pads starting next week. And it's always tough to judge a football player until he gets a helmet and shoulder pads on, because you know, you can run around and be athletic, but you know, football is not just a contact sport; it's a collision sport, and you got to know how they're going to hold up in those situations.
Yeah, no question.
You're installing a mostly new defense. I mean, you said maybe you'll keep a little bit kind of from the old scheme, but the terminology aspect of it, I don't think people really understand how much goes into that for guys who knew a system one way, for you to come in and use just different words for the same thing. Can you just maybe tell people a little bit about what challenge that part can present?
Well, you know, coaches speak is its own language,
right.
And even though there's a lot of common principles and scheme ideas, everybody says it their own kind of way, depending on what tree of coaching you're from, or where you learned it and that type of thing. And so there is some new learning for the football players, even though there'll be carryover from concepts. But in general, in my experience, I found out it's usually easier for the players to adjust and adapt than it is for the coach to come in and try to learn new terminology, and then the coach is trying to translate in his mind in the heat of the moment. And you know, the players are a lot more adaptable than sometimes people give them credit for, and they can learn a new system and everything like that. It'll take a little bit of time, but you know, I have every confidence that our guys will be able to handle it for sure by next fall.
Yeah, we've got a question from somebody in the chat room. How will your experience from the CFL translate to the college game, and will Purdue make any significant, we kind of already addressed this, significant changes to defensive schemes and alignments, but talk about that, because you're obviously going from 12-man and a wider field, and that's intriguing in its own way in terms of in terms of what that and how that translates to the college game.
Well, first of all, most of my coaching experience has been, you know, in the United States and coaching in U.S. college football, and but the last 3 years, you know, to be perfectly honest, I have felt that it's been my biggest growth period as a coach. It forces you to, when you go up there and they have different rules, they have obviously the number of players, the wider field, the unlimited motion by the offense, all present greater challenges actually for the defensive side of the ball than you have here in the United States. And yet, as a defensive coach, you're expected to be able to come up with solutions to those kinds of challenges. And so, you know, it was a great growing experience for me to think outside the box and come up with creative solutions, because you can't just call up an old coaching colleague or a mentor and say, hey, what did you do against this? Well, they're going to say, I have no idea. I don't know what to do with the 12th guy.
Yeah.
And so I was fortunate to be up in Canada with some really good football coaches who had CFL experience and helped train me and those types of things. And now, obviously, everything does not translate over. It's not apples to apples by any stretch. But certainly principles and concepts and things that we're doing up there, I thought were unique, and were great experiences to learn from. And so hopefully some of that experience will help out.
What is it like to be a football guy, though, in a French-Canadian province? I mean, it had to be an interesting experience, especially growing up in North Dakota and being pretty entrenched in the college and the United States experience.
Right. Well, yeah. I grew up in Minnesota, went to college in North Dakota, and then so even when I was in college at North Dakota, we would catch some CFL games and stuff like that, because Winnipeg wasn't too far away, and catch it on television a little bit. But being in Montreal was a great experience. It's a fantastic city, but it is a different cultural experience when the first language is French, and all the street signs and all the store signs and all the menus are in French. And I took Spanish in high school, so that didn't help. But you know, the following was fantastic. You know, we sold out nearly every single game, and we fortunately had a lot of success while I was there, and the people in the city certainly embraced their football up there.
Yeah.
When we spoke with you last week, you didn't want to be consumed with, is this a 4-3, is this a 3-4? The biggest concern for you is just to be versatile? I mean, you want to be able to still disguise kind of regardless?
Well, I want to put our best people on the football field. I think that's one of the biggest jobs of a football coach is, number one, getting the right people on the bus, so to speak, and then getting them in the right seats on the bus. And, you know, we often, you know, categorize things because it's easy and convenient, and, you know, we're going to be multiple on defense just like many offenses are multiple. You know, in fact, I had an article that I got to read, you know, last summer talking about the NFL teams and how they're categorized. You know, the Green Bay Packers were the team that everybody was talking about at that time because they had won the Super Bowl the year before. And, on paper, everybody says they're a 3-4 defense, and you found out that they were actually only in their 3-4 package 32% of the time.
Wow.
And so it was less than half the time. Other than that, they were in some type of substitute package and doing those types of things. And I think that's, in general, whether we look at it that way or not, that's the way football, certainly professional football and now college football, is going. More and more teams are using multiple personnel groups on defense to match how multiple these offenses have become.
A couple good questions from the chat room. Rob writes in, thoughts on, this is a great question for defensive coordinators, but thoughts on soft coverage on prevent defense late in games and when sitting on a lead. It's always a common or a topic of discussion among fans, but how do you approach that, or how do you like your defenses to approach that type of situation? First, you like to be ahead.
Well, first of all, everybody wants to be in that situation at the end of the game when your defense is out on the football field and you have the lead. And, I don't believe in a prevent defense at all in college football because the clock stops every time they get a first down. It's a very different game than in the professional game where the clock continues to run. And therefore, you can, if a team in the professional football, if they have under 2 minutes and the 2-minute warning has already been used, they can only run a handful of plays because the clock just continues to run no matter how many first downs they get. In college, it's very different. Every time they get a first down, they're able to stop the clock until the officials get the ball ready for play and then whistle it. By that time, the offense is ready to snap the ball. They only lose 1 second. And so there really isn't a prevent situation, in my opinion, in college football. There's the one situation, which is the last play situation, in my mind, in college football. And that's when they're further out and they've got to try to throw that Hail Mary pass. How do you play defense then? Then I think you try to play a softer coverage and make sure on that last play. But I don't believe personally in trying to have a prevent defense at the end of the game in college football because of the way the clock works.
Okay.
We had heard, Brian actually spoke with Dale Lennon and was commenting on how smart you are. That you never,
I pay him
never got a B?
And so,
did you ever get a B?
Not in college, no, or high school. So.
That's pretty impressive.
So when did you get one?
Graduate school.
All right, okay.
So when did you know you wanted to be a coach?
I started having those thoughts, I think, when I was probably a junior heading into my senior year as a player. And I had such a great experience as a player and enjoyed playing the game so much that I just couldn't imagine going on without having football be part of my life. And I was a business econ major, and I thought, well, I can either go into the business world and volunteer or be an assistant coach at a high school and do that to kind of get my football fix, or I can jump into this thing as a football coach and try it out. And I was fortunate. I was able to get a couple postgraduate scholarships from the NCAA because of how well I'd done in school, and had my choice to go to any place for graduate school. And so after growing up in Minnesota and college in North Dakota, I went to San Diego State to go to graduate school, and was able to get on Coach Tollner's staff there as just a student assistant and be around it. And then my second year, I was hoping to become a graduate assistant. When that didn't work out, I was able to continue working on my master's at San Diego State, but coach at Grossmont Junior College, which was just right down the road from San Diego State. And Dave Jordan was the head coach there, and he let me, I'm 2 years out of playing, and you got the linebackers, you coach them. And we went undefeated and won a California State championship, and I was hooked. And had a blast coaching, and so that's what I wanted to do.
I don't want to embarrass you with your resume or your summa cum laude from the North Dakota Fighting Sioux, one of my favorite names in all the college sports, and that MBA from San Diego State. That's pretty impressive. And yet, what does it take? You talk about defensive coordinators. You have to be able to be a schemer. Do you have to be a good chess player, so to speak, to hold that position, or do you have to have somebody on your staff that's really good in that area, or is that something that's a little bit overrated from a fan's perspective, do you think?
No, I think the science part of football coaching is very important, and you have to be sound in what it is you do schematically, and especially unless you're going to have just better players than everybody else. And there's only a handful of universities that have that luxury. And the reality is, even those places have really good football coaches in the science of coaching. And so, I enjoy coaching football because I believe it's one of the sports that the coaches have the greatest opportunity to have an impact on the course of a game. And at the same time, there's a rudimentary level of football. It still comes down to beating the man across from you. As much as you can X's and O it and stuff like that, it still comes down to a physical matchup of the players being able to make plays when they're given that opportunity.
A question also about, you obviously have two others, newcomers to the staff, Don Lanholm, the only returnee from the coaching staff. Have you figured out exactly what his specific responsibilities are going to be, or how that's going to shake out in terms of direct responsibilities?
Absolutely. Don is going to work with our Sam linebackers in our base defense, and I'll work with the inside linebackers, and then he's also going to work with our defensive line when we get into some of our sub personnel groups. And so I think that's a good way to utilize. Don's very good as a front coach, and he knows all the ins and outs of what's going on up front, from the D line to the linebacker level, and he certainly knows what's going on in the secondary as well. But he can be very hands-on with all those guys up front, and really gives us a luxury there to have a guy there who can do both.
How much input did you have in the other two assistant defensive coaches? Obviously you had a relationship with Coach Burns coming in from Kansas State, right? Correct.
Coach Burns and I had worked together at Kansas State, and I think anytime you put together a staff, you want to, obviously Coach Hope had it, was the major decision maker in it, and it's his staff. But I think he looked at it and said, we want to try to find the best coaches that we possibly can, and reached out to the entire staff to get names of people and stuff like that that we felt would be able to add to our football.
One other question and about your defense being from Jay Hetfield, a high-risk, high-reward type defense, one that tries to create turnovers. This is somewhat rhetorical in nature. Yeah, I'm sure you want to create turnovers, but are you going to be a risk, a calculated risk type defense in terms of what scheme you're going to bring to the table?
I think that number one, every defense wants to create turnovers and takeaways, and the high risk reward. I think a lot of that will change from some of it from week to week based on your matchups, and being able to, the biggest thing I believe in as a football coach, not just a defensive coordinator, is that you coach continuity football from an entire staff perspective, and you sit down as a staff and decide how this game needs to be. We need to play it in order for us to win this game, and whether it's for the offense to come out and to run the ball a lot and try to eat up the clock and keep the other defense off the field, or to come out and throw it 57 times because that's what it's going to take to win, and then having your defense be in conjunction with that. Well, if we're going to play that style on offense, then this is what we need to do on defense. Yeah. And so I think that changes from week to week based on the opponent you're playing, based on the caliber of the opponent you're playing. And so, I'm not a reckless coach. Yeah. We're going to make sure that we're sound in everything that we do. And at the same time, we want to put enough pressure on offenses that they have to react to us, and we're not always reacting to them. I think, if you're not willing to, risk a little bit, you can't win.
Anything else you want to ask, Stacey?
Last week when we talked, you talked about setting a standard of performance as being one of your priorities in spring ball. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Do you just want guys to have a certain mentality and how they approach the game and how they approach practice?
A standard of a performance is kind of an all-encompassing philosophy about how it is that we're going to go about doing things. And really, it comes from the the Bill Walsh, John Wooden philosophy of thought that you're always playing against yourself, and you're always looking for the best from yourself. It's never, you don't measure yourself against your opponent, you measure yourself against yourself, and you're always trying to achieve your personal best, and that's what your standard performance is. You're shooting for perfection from yourself, knowing that you can't ever quite get there, but that's what you're shooting for, and that's what a standard performance means. And that's what we're going to try to establish, is that we're shooting for perfection when we're out there, and knowing that you're always going to come up just short, and that means no matter how good you are or how, developed you become as a player, there's always a little room for improvement. And same with the coaches. That's what we're shooting for. We're shooting for perfection. I'm still waiting to call the first perfect game, and hoping that it comes, but knowing that it'll probably always be one call or something you wish you could take back or something like that.
I don't know what the definition. I guess it's 0 yards and 0 points, but then you could always have them to have negative
yardage.
So yeah, it's not good enough, Coach. You'll get used to that. One last question for you: the Big Ten, and obviously you've been in the Big 12. You've played in and been around different parts of the country. The nuances of the Big Ten, the nuances of coaching defense in the Big Ten. Any not trick to it, but anything that may not force you to change your philosophy, but pay more attention to particular areas that as you look at this league and the history of this league.
Well, the history of this league has usually been it's been a more run-oriented, physical toughness type of team, and but there's certainly I think in the last 8 years there's been a lot more skill injected into this league as a whole, and so, from a traditional standpoint, obviously you have to be ready for those types of teams that are going to be the Wisconsins and Penn States and come out and try getting two backs and try to run the ball down your throat and be able to play defense against those types of offenses. And then you're seeing now, some things, the no huddle from Northwestern and the spread, Urban Meyer bringing his version of the spread to Ohio State. I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of that in the quarterback run game and those types of things. And so it's going to be a very diverse league. And so, defensively, we have to be able to match up with all of those types of opponents, which goes back into the thing once again about, what kind of defense are you going to be? Well, you have to adapt each week to the type of opponent that you play, because defensively, you don't get to set the personnel that they put out there offensively. The offense gets to have that luxury.
All right, well, we're going to look forward to watching this story unfold, not only in spring ball, which again begins on Tuesday, and through the spring game on April 14th, but fall will be here before you know it. And we wish you well. We wish you well also in your transition with your family moving to West Lafayette or the Lafayette area. So, Coach, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today, and we'll look forward to having you on again. And we always look forward to talking to Purdue football. And Stacy, thank you as well. We'll stay tuned and take a short break, and Cathy Wright-Eger will join us, and we'll talk leadership. And Coach Tibesar gave us a good primer on all of those topics, I think, and some of his comments. We're interested to hear what Cathy has to say about her program and the John Wooden leadership at Purdue. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a couple minutes on Gold and Black Live.
Just one night. One team victorious. The story behind the score. The rivalries. The big plays. From the sidelines to you. On the air, online. Are you ready for the frenzy? Friday Night Frenzy. High school football from where you live.
Check out the Purdue collection now at Follett's. Boiler up with Nike Fantastic T-shirts, League and Champion fashion colors. Simply fabulous, simply Follett's. Purdue pride everywhere on game day. Nike sideline, worn by the team, by the players, and by you. And make every day game day with tailgate toss. Follett's, Purdue pride, a Purdue tradition, 17 game day locations.
West Point Steakhouse is a family-owned restaurant known for premium quality steaks. Open for dinner Thursday through Saturday. Stop by for the Thursday night prime rib special or Friday and Saturday night specials like pasta and seafood. Be sure to come and enjoy all the food and fun at West Point Steakhouse.
You can now get a quote or buy car insurance 24 hours a day. Call me, State Farm Agent Trent Johnson, at 743-9595 and see how much money you can save today.
Going to the Purdue game? Stay at Hilton Garden Inn, West Lafayette at the Wabash Landing. Your family will love the well-appointed guest rooms, the pool, whirlpool, fitness center, the breakfast buffet, and the amazing Hilton Garden Inn staff. Located just 4 blocks from Purdue University, Hilton Garden Inn has long been the choice for Purdue fans. Call today for a reservation and make Hilton Garden Inn your #1 choice.
When you see it happen, report it. Send us your news stories, photos, and videos with our Report It feature. It's easy with WLFI.com and the WLFI smartphone app. With a few simple clicks, you can send videos and photos of breaking news coverage. See your submissions on air as part of our broadcast or online in the Report It gallery. WLFI.com. Always mobile, always connected.
Segment 3, Gold and Black Live, and one of my favorite people in this whole world, actually. You rank very highly, but I don't know if that's a good thing for you or not, but Cathy Wright-Eger joins us. And Cathy has done so much for Purdue, not only in her days in coaching Purdue swimming for 21 years.
21. Mm-hmm.
And then now I think some of her most important work, and not necessarily the most publicized, but the most important work that she's doing in athletics right now with the John R. Wooden leadership. And talk a little bit about that. It's hard to put it all into one easy bundle, but it's a major program that you're doing to try to really not only develop the student athlete from when they leave Purdue, but also have that experience while they're here.
Well, excuse me a little bit. I've got a little bit of laryngitis, but this is a very, very unique program in the sense that we are going to try to take the student athletes aside and try to teach them some of the leadership skills that we think are valuable throughout their life, not just as an athlete, but as a student, as a person. And I think that what we're trying to do, of course, is to see some have it enhance the performances, but at the same time, I think honestly, what I have seen is it really gives a lot of confidence. What we're doing is we know these student athletes have the skill set of leaderships. They have the perseverance and they're loyal, and they have a lot of that John Wooden leadership success pyramid. They have those qualities. What we're trying to do is to make sure that they bring it out. I think this generation, what we've learned is this generation kind of likes to hide those qualities. They're a very tolerant generation. They kind of like to accept everyone the way they are. We're going to ask them to bring out that leadership and we always say, stand up, speak out, fight for your team. I mean, you stand for what your team stands for, and especially as a leader, if you don't stand up for that, then who will?
Yeah, and this program comes from many different areas but one thing that you have where it kind of emanates from is captain's table, which takes place early in the morning. So you expect these kids to get up early, and I've been to a couple of those sessions, and they're inspiring, and you get them by the end of the time they're talking. That's a challenge sometimes to get everybody, and these are natural leaders, because most of these kids that come to this have been voted captains or been voted representatives of their teams. But again, it is a challenge from your perspective to have them push it forward a little bit.
Right. One of the things that Morgan feels very strongly about is that if they're going to be the leaders or the captains of the team, they need to be ready for the real world. And the real world doesn't have meetings at 8 o'clock at night. Yeah. I mean, you have a meeting and you're ready to go first thing in the morning. So in order for us to gather them all first thing in the morning, we have to have it at 6:15, 6:30 in the morning. So that has been a little bit of a challenge to get them to really wake up and discuss things. Really, they're more natural to discuss things, at the 8 o'clock meeting, but 8 p.m. I say, but they've done a really good job, and that is exactly what we're doing. We're bringing them together, and we teach them right from day one. Leadership is not position, it's action. So if you don't show up, you're not going to be a leader. You got to show up first. Yeah. So, I mean, that's been really exciting to see them come and start getting more engaged. I feel like every month they're just a little bit more engaged than they were the month before.
And it starts with emerging leaders and then captain table. Talk a little bit about the emerging leaders program and that trying to pull those first and second year kids into this program and help develop the process.
Actually, I love the emerging leaders. They're like freshmen and sophomores, and they have been handpicked, and the coaches see some of these leadership skill sets in them. And so what we do is we meet once a month and we talk about what is leadership, what does it look like, what does it feel like. Let's look at the leaders on your team. What are they doing that's really helping your team perform? What are some of the things that they might be doing that might be hindering your team? What can you learn from it? What kind of leader do you want to be when it's your time to take the team? So it's almost like a leadership internship per se. And I like that because I think back in my coaching years, we wanted them to be a leader when they were a junior or senior, but did we really talk about it the whole way? So this is a little bit more teaching oriented, it's more nurturing, it's getting them to compare each other and kind of look in the mirror and say, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses? Will I be a good leader, will I not be?
Yeah. The face of this program, obviously John Wooden and the wonderful principles that he brought to the table. In more recent times, Drew Brees is kind of that poster child for what the consummate leader. Yet you have some student athletes right now. One just comes to mind that just celebrated senior night in Rob Hummel, and again, not only just a kind of guy that you want, if you're a parent, you want your kid to be like, but also seem to possess all those qualities. Talk about a guy like Rob and that impact that he's had not only on Purdue men's basketball, but on the entire department.
Oh, definitely the entire department, because that's one of the programs that we've talked about this in Emerging Leaders. What program, when you think of a program that has really strong leaders, who do you think of? And they say, men's basketball, and they do. I mean, he and each one, and JJ, they learned that all the way through that when it was their time, that they know that their leadership skills are so important, and Robbie's just done that perfectly. I mean, he tries not to be too bossy about it, but he also knows when someone needs, a silent little let's go, or who needs a kick in the butt. And he's not afraid to do either one. He's got really good EQ, so he knows, which one to do, and he kind of gets to know the people on his team, and that's what we're trying to teach our other, all of our other leaders to do. Watch for them. If you see someone's homesick, that's not when they need the kick in the butt necessarily. Yeah. They might need something. Hey, you want to go out to dinner or something. But those things off the court make so much difference when you all get on the court.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, and I know you are an active participant or an active viewer of watching these teams. I've seen Hummel this year on a couple of occasions. Oh. Do you kind of do a fist pump to the television, or when you're in Mackey Arena, when you see somebody? I've seen Robbie be not so quiet with a couple of his teammates as they're headed into the huddle. You look at that and say that message received?
Exactly. I love that. I love watching that, and then I can bring that up on at a team meeting or at the BAC when we're talking about those instances. Like, you see it. You see different people really stepping up and being a leader at certain times, and if they don't do that, then there's not going to be change.
Yeah. One of the things also that the student athletes, and we're just starting, it's about a year and a half where you've now can get kind of a certificate for graduation, and talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that I was able to participate in February's program, where you brought a drug and alcohol person in that was just outstanding, and had a lot of you had I don't know, probably about 150 kids there that were watching, but that's all part of their program. And what do they get when they complete the program as well? Talk a little bit about that.
What we're trying to do is bring in a guest speaker once a month and talk about some of the different characteristics in the Pyramid of Success, John Wooden's. And what I liked when Drew Brees came in and talked, he said that they do that at the Saints. They bring other people in because sometimes certain people will resonate with the student athletes, certain people won't. But we're going to try to get as many people in to talk to them, to teach them some of these skill sets that we want them to learn. And then if you go to 15 of these over your 4 or 5 years that you're at Purdue, you can actually get a certification in the John Wooden Leadership Institute. And it's really neat. We have a team dinner, and we sit down and we actually watch John Wooden do, it's a 40-minute interview, and it's how he came up with those 15 criteria in the Pyramid of Success, and it's fantastic just to sit through that. And at first I was like, guys, now, because this generation's used to like flashy things and video and YouTube, this is a 93-year-old man sitting down reciting poetry, and I was like, guys, now, really pay attention here. This is not going to be like real flashy. I mean, were sitting on the edge of their seats. It was so neat. In fact, Gerald Gooden had to miss it. He had an interview. And so he came up to my office to get the DVD, and he watched it. And I said, Gerald, how am I going to know if you watch this or not to get certified? And he goes, oh, you'll know. You'll know. You can quiz me when I came back. He texted me that night. He'd watched it 3 times in a row. Yeah. I mean, that's how inspiring John Wooden can be, to bring out your best in you. You know, he has that way, and that's what we're trying to do, is them to become passionate about leadership, become passionate about being a great student athlete at Purdue.
And you have a situation, and there are times when students make mistakes, and obviously the much publicized situation last a couple weeks ago with men's basketball. Yeah. What's the learning experience there, and what message do you maybe at some point in time talk to not just as men's basketball, but talk to everyone about in terms of team dynamic and how to move forward?
That's a great point, because think about it, Alan. When you're in college, that's when you're going to make mistakes, and you've got to learn from them. And I think this is one of the biggest things about the leadership program, is we talk about that stuff. We went right in there and talked to them about the Penn State. You know, bystander intervention. We talked about that. We had just used DJ as an example of someone with a lot of passion. And, you know, I mean, honestly, our meeting was on Valentine's morning, and the subject was passion. And we were kind of comparing him to our new Brian Cardinal. Yeah. And he is very passionate, and that's probably what got him in a little bit of trouble. He needs to learn when to push that passion, when to hold it back a little bit. And but we will definitely talk about it at the next meeting and say, learn from it. And we aren't going to hide it under the rug, you know, so that might prevent someone else from making that same mistake. And I'm going to try to get him to share with us, you know, share if he had to do it all over again, what would he have done different? So if they're ever in that situation, they might do something, just one little thing that was different that might have had different results. Leadership
is so critical, and all coaches talk about it. And without necessarily mentioning names, but you know, we certainly, Rob Henry voted a captain as a sophomore on his football team, speaks volumes. Talk about some of the young names that of people that you think might be some of those rising stars, some of those emerging leaders in Purdue's athletic programs.
Well, Rob Henry is definitely one. I mean, and he even just walking down the hall when I saw him, I was like, who is that guy? You know, his freshman year, we need him in there, because he's opinionated, and there's something about it. He just walks, you know, differently. I mean, he has an air about him, and it's not cockiness, it's confidence. And I think Carly Kramer has that. Carly Kramer has been, I mean, she's finishing her sophomore year, but she's already in the BAC, and she'll make a big impact in that. There's different people from each sports. I think the wrestler, Brent Atwood, he wrestles tomorrow. There's an article about him in the Journal and Courier today. That kid is phenomenal. He is going to be not just a wrestling leader, he's going to be one of the leaders at Purdue. There's just something really, really special about him.
Do football players listen to wrestlers, listen to cross-country runners? I mean, do you see some of that going on?
Absolutely. That's what's the neatest thing about it, is that, you know, like we'll pull up a situation in a team, and then we'll ask each sport to tell us, what would you do in this situation? What would you do? And then they can compare, you know, and they all have different ways of dealing with, you know, situations or problems or issues or but it's fun for them to like hear what different people say. And yes, especially in emerging leaders, when they're really kind of no names when they come into the emerging leaders, and they're just a bunch of very, very passionate student athletes that really care about their team, and not just that year, but the future. You know, they're looking at the program. And so they really share ideas. And I do a lot of group work where we'll put like a cross country and a football player and a wrestler together, and a swimmer and a tennis player, and get them in small groups and ask them questions, and then they share ideas. And I think they're really learning a lot from each other.
You know, one of the breakfast I went to, I think it was in January, but talking about you had each team give itself a grade in terms of leadership. I found that very interesting, because there were most of them did pretty well. There were a couple that were very, very honest about where they were as a team. And what I found interesting too wasn't necessarily a correlation, not always a correlation between winning and losing, but talk about that. And are you seeing now that the fruits of your labor in terms of getting kids to step up? Are you starting to see that emerge with Purdue kids?
That's our whole goal, and I do think we're starting to see it. And we're asking them at a young age, tell us what your strengths and weaknesses are. Stand up in front of people and say it. That's hard to do. That's hard for adults to do, you know.
Yeah.
But I think the more there's a lesson we want them to learn, and that is to be a leader, you don't have to be perfect. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, and you learn from it, and you got to keep analyzing and keep looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, all right, I think I could have done a little bit better here, or boy, this person is really good at this. I need to, you know, pull them in and help them. That's what we're trying to get them to do, to see. So when they gave their grades, I like that because they are being pretty honest. And I want them to constantly evaluate themselves. And what does the coach think of me as a leader? Am I doing what the coach? I had a meeting with 2 tennis players today and gave them both assignment. They're going to go in and talk to their coach and say, this is, am I doing what you want from me as a senior this year? Is there anything else that you need from me?
Quickly, and one thing we've talked about before, how do you manage that being that in that middle person's position? That can be an interesting situation because they may come to you before they come to your coach.
Yeah.
How do you manage that in terms of what kind of challenges does that present for you?
The biggest thing is just to constantly keep looking at our whole program. It's our family, it's our athletic family, and keep the big picture in mind. And to the student athletes, a lot of times I'll say, you know, all right, I can validate some of that. I hear you loud and clearly, but you're using that as a crutch. Mm-hmm. You know, there's going to be situations in their life that they don't have the perfect boss, they don't have the perfect situation, but you can either cry about it or get up and work a little harder, you know. And I'm trying to teach them, you know, that mentality. So I try not to get in the middle, but I definitely keep that communication lines going. Like I'll tell the coach, I'm meeting with your captains today. Or I'm meeting with your whole team, you know, at my house tonight and having dinner for them. And, you know, we're going to do some team bonding. And sometimes they actually just need to be away from the coaches a little bit, you know, just to really air some things out that the coaches really don't. The coaches need to coach and recruit. They don't need to hear all the little minutia of college kids being away from home. Yeah. So sometimes if they air that stuff out and then just go to practice ready to work, it's better. All
right, well, we could go on and on about this. We're going to let you save that voice for Westside Western tonight up at Twin Lakes, and she has a son that is a junior on the Westside basketball team, so that will be an interesting and fun night as well. So we'll look forward to that. Thank you to all that were involved today, certainly Clark Kellogg, Tim Tibesar, Kyle Charters, Stacy Clarity, and of course our friends in the back room, Gordon and Kim and Patsy, for all your work as well. Our sponsors, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, and of course Hilton Garden Inn, Follett's, and West Point Steakhouse. Now, we will be back next week. We could have, stay tuned because we could have some schedule changes if the men play at the same time. I don't think we're going to go head-to-head with Purdue men's basketball next week at 2 if Purdue is a 5 seed and playing Friday afternoon. So check local listings, as they say. Just come to our site and we'll tell you what's going on. In 2 weeks, the first week of the tournament, we know better than to try to go head-to-head against that. We will not have a show. So thanks to all for being involved, and we will look forward to our next show, in all likelihood next week at 2 p.m. as we talk more on Gold and Black Live.